Jane Velez Mitchell with Jane Unchained. We are here with our Boycott Meat Roundtable, and we're very delighted and honored to have today Saffin Parrish-Fams, who is considered one of the leading workers' comp attorneys in the United States. She has a wealth of knowledge. We thank you for joining us. Want to ask you about the fact that more than 200 meatpacking workers have died in the United States of COVID-19. At least 42,534 slaughterhouse workers have gotten COVID-19. Now, OSHA, which is the federal agency in charge of worker safety, has just issued fines to two meatpacking plants that total just under $30,000. These are companies that make billions and billions of dollars a year. So in the widespread reporting, the Washington Post says essentially it's a pittance for them. It's chump change. So what is your reaction as a workers' comp attorney to that message from the federal government? And how does a worker who's gotten COVID or who's a member of a family where a meatpacking worker has died of COVID, how do they get compensation? Either workers' comp or family death benefits?
Yeah, well, I mean, the slap on the wrist from OSHA is a bit disappointing, I think, to everyone, especially when you consider that these are for-profit companies. And so what changes behavior? Well, what changes behavior is an effect on the bottom line. And the OSHA fines are not going to have an effect on the bottom line. But to answer your second part of your question, these employers, meatpacking plants are particularly an employer at issue, but we also have, health services workers, frontline workers, people who are working in hospitals and nursing homes, things of that nature. When you have an employer who is, I guess, widely known based on the statistics to have a prevalence of COVID within their workplace, people should consider looking at bringing a workers' compensation case. Now, what is a workers' compensation case? Workers' compensation is a little bit different from a liability claim. In liability, in traditional tort, you have to show some sort of fault by your employer. And that's where, some of these fines and OSHA findings where they disregarded worker safety becomes important because you have to prove liability. But in workers' compensation, this is a system where the injured worker, or in the case of a death, the surviving spouse or children are entitled to benefits based on the fact that the injured worker died because of something that occurred in their workplace. And you don't have to prove fault. What you have to prove is that the death arose out of it in the course of employment. Well, what does arising out of it in the course of employment mean with respect to COVID? What you have to show is that more likely than not, the injured worker contracted COVID in their workplace. And so when we have places like meatpacking plants or hospitals, nursing homes, places like that, where we know that these people are going to work every day, putting their lives on the line as essential workers, and are being subjected to a higher rate of exposure than, and particularly with meatpacking plants where they're not necessarily following social distancing, the safety protocols that we know the CDC is recommending, that puts them at an increased likelihood of contracting COVID in their workplace. And then you look at the fact that statistically, there's a higher number of meatpacking workers who are contracting COVID than what you see in the general population. That creates a strong likelihood of being able to prove that they contracted COVID at their workplace, and that you would be able to then make a claim for workers' compensation benefits. Now,
let me ask you a quick question, because one of the things that was immediately said after the slaughterhouses started to become COVID-19 hotspots And members of the administration came out and said, oh, it's the lifestyle of the workers because they are often impoverished. In fact, that's the only reason why you would take a job at a slaughterhouse is that you're impoverished and you really don't have another option. Nobody wants to be a slaughterhouse worker killing animals all day or deboning animals all day. It's not something that you aspire to be. It's a last resort job option. And it was very interesting that the administration immediately started downplaying that they got the COVID at the slaughterhouse when obviously the slaughterhouses are hotbeds of COVID and they didn't just get it, walking around their neighborhood. So do you think that was an attempt to help the companies protect from workers' comp lawsuits?
I do think so. I notice a trend with attorneys who are representing insurance companies and employers trying to downplay the connection between workplace exposure to COVID versus out in the general population. And they will try to defend wrongful death suits under work comp or for people who are hospitalized and have significant health consequences from COVID. They will try to downplay the work exposure. But what we know is that, the percentage of the general population who has COVID compared to the percentage of the working population in some of these frontline worker environments, including meatpacking plants, there's a statistical difference in there. And so, they're doing that to discourage people from filing workers' compensation claims. However, if for anybody who has a loved one who has been hospitalized, who has, these exorbitant hospital bills, being on life support, ventilation systems, or who has the long-term sequela that we're now knowing about, whether it's, long-term breathing problems, heart conditions, or, for the families who my heart truly goes out to, the ones who have a loved one who dies from this,
Yeah,
they should be seeking a workers' compensation attorney because particularly with respect to some of these frontline workers and the places that we know are the hotbeds for COVID, at least in Iowa, you have to prove that it's more likely than not that you contracted it at work versus out in the general public.
I know you have to go in a second, but I want to ask Joe Enriquez Henry, who is with LULAC, represents workers as well as Forward Latino. Is there a way to help these workers seek workers' compensation by partnering them with attorneys? I mean, they're not in a position where they can just be like interviewing attorneys. They're trying to survive. They're sick. And in some cases, you're dealing with families of people who have died. Again, more than 203 slaughterhouse workers have died of COVID. Can you work to hook them up with attorneys, Joe?
Yeah, most definitely, Jane. I mean, that's what we've done in the past. We did that at JBS back in 2016 when hundreds of workers were concerned about line speed and the safety in the workplace. And there are worker comp attorneys that are reaching out in different parts of the state. But clearly what Saffin is stating here is something where we need to get many more of these workers who are concerned about what's happening. I'm not sure which clients Saffin has right now, but I'm sure she is focused on all the many of the 22 meat processing facilities in the state.
All right. Well, any final thoughts? Because I know you have to run, Saffin, on what people should do. Let's say they have a relative who's died, and I keep putting up this picture, but this is a woman who works at a slaughterhouse, and I don't know what her condition is, but there she is in the hospital. This is not like the flu. This is obviously a deadly disease. It's killed at least 190,000 Americans.
Well, I would encourage people to reach out to an attorney and at least explore their options. Look, we know that meatpacking plants and other employers, we know that, for example, Tyson and other meatpacking plants were behind some of the decimation of the workers' compensation system in 2017, where they tried to make it harder for injured workers to file claims. We know that from studies from the Department of Labor and OSHA that there's a real attempt to try to keep injured workers from pursuing workers' compensation claims. They make it difficult. They put them in fear of their jobs if they make these kinds of claims. We also know from the Department of Labor and OSHA that due to this kind of race to the bottom, approximately 80% of the cost of workplace injuries and deaths it's borne by the taxpayers and the injured workers themselves, because the employers are not being held responsible for these things because of these efforts to make it difficult to file claims. So two things, in my opinion. One is there's never going to be an incentive for the employers to make their workplace safe unless they are held responsible for the full cost of workplace injury or deaths, because they're for-profit companies. The bottom line is, when it becomes expensive to sort of sacrifice injured workers as widgets as part of their production process, they don't have the same incentive to make their workplaces safe. So, you could be helping somebody else by pursuing a claim that puts that cost back on the employer or the insurance company, instead of you and the taxpayers bearing that cost. So this is how change happens in a system. First of all, so that's my first thought on that. My second thought is, look, most attorneys who do people do so on a contingency fee basis, and most of us will give a free initial consultation to somebody, and you can always call an attorney and ask to talk to them without your employer knowing about it. So you can at least explore your options, explore what the risks and benefits are, and make an informed decision about what you need to do to protect yourself and your family.
You made a very good point, is that some people go, oh, a lawyer, I can't afford a lawyer. They can work on contingency. They get a percentage of the settlement, and they don't have to put any money up front. I want to thank you so much, Saffin Parrish-Fams, one of the nation's leading experts on workers' compensation. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. And what we're going to do now is go straight out to Farmer John's, which is in downtown Los Angeles. Cesar Asebedo, you are out there. What's going on?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So we're out here at Farmer John, along with members of the Save Movement, Animal Rights Network, LA Animal Save, Slaughter Free LA, and also DXC LA. And basically, we're doing worker outreach. We're giving Gatorades to the workers and telling them that we care, along with a flyer which has information where they can contact, to get help.
So in a different way, reaching out to workers. And Ellen Dent is right there behind you. Let's see what she has to say. Hi. Can you let workers know? And by the way, we invite Farmer John, which is owned by Smithfield, which is a Chinese conglomerate, as well as JBS and Tyson and any of these companies on at any time. But the workers' compensation expert we just spoke with said everybody who has gotten COVID or has gotten sick from COVID at a slaughterhouse, but I think it applies in general, should see an attorney to see if they can work on contingency basis to get representation, to get workers' compensation.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a great idea, especially with all of the symptoms that people have even after supposedly getting better from the infections. So they should be offered some sort of, time off or paid time off, because they put their lives in danger to work in these places.
Absolutely, and you are live right now. Yeah. What's the mood there? What's the mood?
People are pretty receptive, but I don't know if I think people are worried about not having a job to go to. But I'm sure they want help as well with the conditions, because there's probably, benefits that they are not getting that they should be receiving, such as the ones that you spoke of. But I did speak to one gentleman. He said he went vegan two days ago. So
wow,
he's a worker here. So that's awesome.
Wow. Well, I want to thank both of you. I know, please stay safe. I know you're out there with a large group of people. Thank you for bringing us up to date on what's happening, because this is the Save movement, and they are out there at these facilities trying to dialogue with workers. So let me ask you, Gwenna Hunter, one of the big issues is that they say that these are essential workers. That was one of the real points that, oh my gosh, they have to go to work. Okay. Trump ordered the meat processing plants to remain open. Whereas in reality, those of us in the animal welfare environmental movement are saying, like PETA said in this full page ad, it's time to move away from meat, that it's not only just a cruel industry, but it's bad for human health. It's contributing to climate change. So is it, not to mention that pandemics stem from our abuse of animals in general, and there could be another pandemic that could come up based on factory farm animals. There's one in China right now. There's a pig virus that has jumped from pigs to humans, according to published reports. The question is it going to go from humans to humans? So what are your thoughts about all of these legal maneuverings, and at the heart, this being a consumer issue? Oh, let me unmute you. Unmute. Yes, go ahead.
Got it. Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
So I sent you an article just a few minutes ago. This happened back in April, and I'd always wondered what type of recourse they have. Annie Grant, who is an African-American, I'm just going to read this. It's less than 30 seconds. Had been feverish for 2 nights, worried about coronavirus outbreak, and she works at Tyson. It says it in the
whose article? Who published it?
Read.
Okay, go ahead.
This is New York Times. So Annie Grant, 55, had been feverish for 2 nights. Worried about the coronavirus outbreak, her adult children had begged her to stay home rather than return to a frigid poultry plant in Georgia, where she had been on the packaging line for nearly 15 years. But on the 3rd day, she was ill. They got a text from their mother. They told me I had to come back to work, it said. Ms. Grant ended up returning home and died in a hospital on Thursday morning after fighting for her life on a ventilator for more than a week. 2 other workers at Tyson Foods poultry plant, where she had worked in Camilla, Georgia, have also died in recent days. This was published on April 9th. And she literally, I don't know if you can see this picture.
Yeah,
this is
I remember reading that article.
Family.
Yes, it's very sad. So it'd be interesting to know. I have no idea, but I wonder if her family got any death benefits. What I'm seeing emerge right now, Joe, and that's a really, really good point. Thank you for bringing that up, Gwenna, is that these workers have to be helped. There needs to be an organization that connects them. It's easy for us to say, call a lawyer. I've interviewed lawyers as a journalist for 38 years.
Yes.
Even, me, and I've dealt with lawyers for years, for decades, some of the top lawyers in the world in big criminal cases. It's scary for me to call an attorney. I mean, it's like going to see a surgeon or something. I mean, it's intimidating. We need to make it easier and create a process for these people to seek legal representation. Joe.
We do. We have to play a part in this. I mean, through our boycott effort that we're doing now, boycottmeat.com, we are connecting with activists, with unions, with workers especially, and we need to communicate how it is their right to communicate with an attorney. It's their right to have it be confidential, to seek redress on these crimes that are being committed by these companies. So we do have to play our part. We encourage the public to really join with us. We have many activists contacting us at boycottmeat.com.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is there needs to be an organization that says, here's a worker who got COVID, may very well still be experiencing some of the terrible effects that for many people they're reporting don't go away. That, in fact, we know one person, I've only spoken to her, well, I've actually only emailed her, but I've heard her describe in videos that she's not getting any better, that she's exhausted. She walks a couple of blocks and she's exhausted. There's a lot of people who have long-term, if they don't die, but it's not like you get it and then you have a hot soup and then you're fine. I mean, you could be suffering from years For all we know very little about this, even at this point. There needs to be an organization that connects slaughterhouse workers with attorneys. And it needs to be done in a way that is systematic, where they don't have to do all the math and reinvent the wheel. For them, many of these people don't speak English whatsoever. In one slaughterhouse alone, according to Kim Cordoba, who is a representative, 30 languages are spoken. Often these are new immigrants. Some of them are undocumented, according to many published reports. We can't expect them to go and find a lawyer. It's ridiculous. Gwenna, weigh in on that.
And I'm so glad to hear you say this, because as I listen to, the explanations, I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But even for the average person to even pursue, doing what you just laid out is kind of a big task. So you have people in prison, like you said, not in prison. Well, it is a prison in a sense, but in these slaughterhouses that can't speak good English. And then you have a lot that are coming straight out of the prison system. They don't trust anything. So to have them approach an attorney and turn on the place that they're working for, that's a gamble most people do not want to take, and they won't, because it's either that decision or possibly sleeping outside.
Yeah, so I want to go back very quickly, because we're back out. See if we can get somebody. Okay, you said there was somebody else, Cesar, that you wanted to talk to. Is Amy Jean there?
Yes, we have Amy Jean right here.
Yeah, hi, Amy Jean. Would you like to issue a statement to our Boycott Meat Roundtable about what's happening out there?
Well, we're here reaching out to the workers to let them know that we're concerned for them, because we are super aware of the human rights violations that they deal with every day. And we want them to know that we're in their corner. We're trying to get them a better job. We're trying to change the food system. And we're not just going to let these companies take advantage of them the way that they do. We're going to speak up for them and the animals.
Thank you so much. I don't want to keep you. I know it's very difficult out there, but I do appreciate all of you, and stay safe, please. Thank you. Thank you, Amy Jean Davis and Cesar. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're gonna let them continue on with their movement. Of course, they go to these slaughterhouses as a matter of course every week. In fact, several times a week, and they bear witness to the pigs going into the slaughterhouse being slaughtered, and they also try to interact with the workers. But Gwenna, you were raising a really important point about the fear factor. Mm-hmm. They're afraid of losing their jobs. They're living on the edge. They have usually very little saved. And the idea of going to a lawyer must feel absolutely overwhelming to anybody, even people who dealt with the legal system. When you pick up to call a lawyer, it's like, oh, this is going into a new phase. Is there a way, Joe, to create a system whereby we have a nonprofit like an ACLU, but specifically to help slaughterhouse workers, because COVID isn't going away. Now, to give the side of the meatpacking plants who were invited on any time, they say that they've corrected the issues that were raised connected to these just a handful of slaughterhouses, even though there's almost 500 slaughterhouses around the country. And they say basically they had to figure it out themselves because they didn't get very much guidance from the federal government, which I do believe. And so they're saying that essentially the government is coming in too little, too late, and that they lollygagged. And so that's their side of the story, that the government didn't really help them, which I do believe. But nonetheless, we're talking about workers who've made the ultimate sacrifice, death or illness. And there are systems in place for them to get workers' compensation, or for their survivors, their family, to get death benefits, hypothetically. And we're trying to figure out how to get justice for these people. Again, 203 slaughterhouse workers have died, and many more are sick. And so what we really need to think about is, how do you connect these individuals who are at the very bottom of the social ladder with attorneys on a contingency basis. That's something that has to be done by an organization.
There is an immediate way, Jane. 85% of meat slaughterhouse workers are represented by the union, specific union, that is the Commercial Workers Union. There are local unions in many of these facilities. One of the first ways is we would encourage workers to communicate with their local UFCW local union. If for some reason they can't reach them, they should contact us. We'll give them the direct contact information. Historically, local unions have been the first line of defense to provide legal counsel or access to legal counsel for workers. So the pressure should be put there.
Okay, why not jump in?
I got a question about that. The way this system works that I'm starting to have more awareness of is that they usually have someone placed in every area to make sure that they know what's going on. So I wouldn't be surprised, I don't know this for a fact, if they don't trust the unions as well because they know something that we, the general public, don't know. There could be some shadiness going on with these unions, which is why they're not reaching out to them.
Sure.
Well, I think there's a big fear, of course. That's why there's something called attorney-client privilege. You want to have an organization that gets them right to the attorneys because let's be real, 203 workers have died. I would love to know the stats on how many have been connected by their respective unions, right? The families to attorneys. It's always easy to say there's this they'll take care of it. But when there's evidence that it's not being taken care of, to me, that calls for another organization to step in and fill the breach. And you're absolutely right. My whole life, I've been a member almost since I was a kid of SAG and AFTRA. And I used to go to union meetings and, they were right near the news station where I worked. And I was looking around to see who's listening, or if there's management, or if there's somebody who is a member of the union who goes to management and says what's happening, right? Because people live in fear. Okay.
And Jane, and that is something that we've already done through our grassroots coalition is we have also our group of boycottmeat.com group has provided information, contact information for attorneys, but you're bringing up something that's very important. We do have to build a platform for that. We have to have a hotline for every state for workers to call. That information can be communicated in various languages for these workers, because you're right, Gwenna, you're right, Jane. Workers are intimidated by the process. It needs to be one-stop shopping. We have to put it together. This has been done before in other efforts in the labor movement to provide that platform that connects workers either with unions or directly with attorneys. So we can do it, but we have to do it on our own.
Exactly. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I can imagine these folks. We live in a high-tech world where just functioning, we're all challenged all the time. In 1 week, I learned about Trello and Miro and all these platforms that I didn't even know existed. And the world is getting much more complicated at a very rapid rate. And imagine trying to navigate all that. Quite often when I'm dealing with anything, whether it's a medical issue, like calling your medical provider for something, I always wonder, how do people who don't speak this language perfectly handle this? Because I'm struggling to figure it out. And I've grown up here, I'm born here, and I speak the language. The bureaucracy can be so Kafkaesque. That's why it doesn't have to be complicated. It could be one hotline number, and you provide and one email, one website where you put in your information. A lawyer will contact you, and it will be done in a way where attorney-client privilege, secrecy is kept, no ifs, ands, or buts. And, it's got to be, it's like these hotlines that they have. Like they have hotlines when people are in crisis. They have suicide hotlines. They have depression hotlines. They have people who want to drink and they're alcoholics hotlines, and people who are drug addicts who want to use hotlines. There should be a hotline where people can call when they get the urge. And it doesn't have to be a different one in every state. You can have a list of lawyers who are allowed to practice in their respective states and connect them. But that's the other part of the issue, is that it's not so easy to find a lawyer who's going to work on just pure contingency. So there has to be an entire group of lawyers who say, this is such an injustice, I'm willing to do some pro bono as well. Joe?
Well, I agree. And we can build a group of attorneys. I mean, clearly the highest density of slaughterhouses are here in the Midwest, although California and other parts of the country, Texas, South Carolina, North Carolina, but we can build a group of attorneys that folks can contact. We can do an 800 line on our page, on our webpage. To do that, that's not difficult to do. So let's do it. I'm all for it. I think by next week, let's have that hotline up and ready. We will have some attorneys, some law offices that want to take this on, because it is in the interest of these attorneys, not just the workers, to come together. Attorneys, just like the attorney you had on, we can find her contact information and connect it to a hotline.
Yeah, and I want to go back out. Cesar, you've been listening to this. Do you think that if it was 100% anonymous and that these workers just had a number that they could call to get legal representation, where attorney-client privilege kicks in right away, there's no way that their names are going to get back to anybody, that they would take advantage of that?
I do think that would, help be a part of the solution, because I believe they are fearful of, it coming back on them because they're putting their name out there. But if they had that full confidentiality, I think you would get much more, contacts and things of that nature, and people just, would have hope of some avenue that they could use. And you can see the workers passing by us right now.
Yeah.
We already handed out over 200 Gatorades, 100 flyers with the number where we're trying to help them. But, a number.
What's your number? What does your number do? What does your number do?
Our number, it gets them directly to us, and then we're just going to try to use our resources to, help their outlook look better for them.
Yeah. And yeah, there's all sorts of efforts to get slaughterhouse workers other jobs, first dibs on other jobs. Again, Gwenna, nobody goes into, you don't major in slaughterhouse when you're going to school, and there's no slaughterhouses in Beverly Hills or on Park Avenue.
That's right. And I wanted to say, I think also too, as part of the vegan.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
As part of the vegan community, being entrepreneurs, being organizers, we need to put pressure on these plant-based organizations to open up their hiring practices and get the world to look at hiring practices in a different way, because it's too strict. It's not for the average person. Most people have had some type of run-in or some issue, or there's something, and it doesn't mean that they're bad people. They just had a bad experience, and they're worthy of an opportunity. So I think we need to put more pressures on the plant-based vegan community to look at how they hire people, because these would be amazing employees.
And you're bringing up a point that's something I wasn't even aware of, Gwenna. You brought this to my attention. I pretty much looked at slaughterhouse workers as being immigrants for the most part. And especially when Kim Cordova told me 30 languages are spoken at one slaughterhouse alone. But you're saying that Americans, and in particular African Americans who get out of prison, are often sort of guided into working at a slaughterhouse.
Yeah, because you're not going to be turned down.
Yeah,
turned down, and oftentimes there's pressure put, which is crazy to me. They usually, if they're on probation, oftentimes they have a specific amount of time to find a job, or it's another ding against them where they can end back into the system. It's so inhumane. It's ridiculous the way they make them jump through so many different hoops to not go back into slavery, which is what the prison system is. But yeah, this takes a little bit of stress off of them. It's like they'd probably rather be in the slaughterhouse dealing with that stress than on the outside hoping and praying that somebody hires them and that they don't get back in the system in the meantime.
And I want to bring it back to the consumer. All of this horror is occurring because people choose to eat these animals. This is not an essential product. despite what the Trump administration said when they decided to invoke the Defense Protection Act to declare meat packing companies, which are slaughterhouses where billions of animals are killed every year, essential businesses, which also provided some cover for the companies themselves. There's legal benefits to the companies when that kind of declaration is made. So let's just do a final roundtable with what everybody would say to consumers about consuming animals in light of this. And of course, there is the horror of high speed, which really connects to this, because in the articles I've read, they said that one of the reasons why there were lack of social distancing is because of the high speed horror, that if you provide more space, it slows down the killing line. So if you think about it, here's an animal, and then if it's a lot faster than here's an animal dying, here's an animal dying. It's like slowing down the death music, as it were. So they don't want to do that. The Trump administration has heralded the very controversial high-speed slaughter that started out as a pilot program, and they'd like to take it nationwide. We're talking about high-speed slaughter of pigs, for example. This is barbarism. And so on so many levels, what would you say to the consumers who feel they're still in that denial phase about the impact of eating animals on human health, a leading cause of heart disease and cancer? Processed meat, which is bacon, which is made at a pig slaughter plant, is officially cancer causing, according to the World Health Organization. You have the wildfires, which are caused by deforestation, and most of the deforestation is happening to create cattle grazing land or farm land, which makes food to feed farm animals. There's so many more farm animals than there are humans. And so, deforestation, habitat destruction, water pollution, drought, human illness, world hunger, because these animals eat so much, they're the biggest contributor to world hunger. And now all these slaughterhouse workers getting COVID and dying. What would you say, starting with Cesar, let's go back out to you to a final. What would you say to the consumer?
I would say that, you eat at least 3 meals a day, and you have those choices to vote, and it makes a difference. It makes an impact, hashtag boycott meat. And if everybody did this, we can start making change. I mean, the weather the other day for LA and surrounding areas said smoke. It didn't say unhealthy air, it said smoke. And that's a whole nother topic, but definitely, we can save lives.
Absolutely. Gwenna?
I would just say for people to, look really closely at what the solution is. A lot of times we say, oh, it's this, it's that, but people don't really dissect. Just go as deeply as you possibly can. Because what Jane said is 100% factual. It's the animal agriculture, it's the deforestation. I mean, it's our lust to just destroy on this planet. And especially with animals, they are living, conscious, aware beings that have full awareness that they're alive and that they have a purpose just like you.
And look at, these are just 3 random images from a slaughterhouse. That's blood just gushing out of the necks of these pigs. We can't forget about the violence inflicted on these animals. I know everybody considers that irrelevant. They could talk about, all the people who had died at the meatpacking plants. Does adding that billions of animals get killed diminish the suffering of the humans? No. Just like with the wildfires. Everybody's talking about the terrible situation with people dying. My heart goes out to all those people who've lost their homes. It doesn't mean we can't mention that billions of animals likely have died in these fires. Does that denigrate humans that we also mention? So when they say 33 people have died, 33 deaths, no, it's a lot more than 33 deaths. It's 33 plus a billion deaths. And that counts, because when we have wiped out all wildlife, and we have already wiped out almost 70% of all wildlife in this planet in the last 50 years. That was a report that just came out last week, and CNN had it and everybody else had it. When we wipe out all of the animals, which we're on track to do that by 2026, we're going to have an ecological collapse, and we too will go extinct. We cannot just live on this planet alone without any animal. So that's going to trigger the end. So what would you say, Joe Enriquez Henry, who comes at this from a workers' rights perspective primarily?
Well, you have 4 good reasons to boycott meat. One is to protect workers. The other thing is you're going to protect your health. You're going to protect the animals. You're going to protect the environment. If you believe in science, you will boycott meat for all those reasons. Take a pick. But we need a boycott right now. It makes sense. Science is on our side. People need to stop doing it. We need to transfer to plant-based production. That's it. Plain and simple.
I want to thank everybody, and thank you, Gwenna. Thank you, Joe. Thank you to the attorney who joined us, and thank you to Animal Save Movement and Cesar Asebedo on the front line with Ellen Dent and Amy Jean Davis. And we are here every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, talking the Boycott Meat Roundtable. Hopefully next week we'll have an update on what we're doing to connect victimized slaughterhouse workers with attorneys who will work on contingency to find them justice. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.